Hello, everybody. Welcome to another scintillating episode of the Standard Deviation Podcast. I'm your host, Simo, and together with me we have Juliana. How are you?
It's been a minute, Simo, since we did this. I feel like I forgot how to do this.
Yeah, you've changed your hair. I've changed my hair.
Yes, and I'm here on my weight loss journey of veganism. And
Oh, yeah?
yeah, this is
How's that
my
going?
second month
Any
going into.
regrets?
Well, we have Orthodox Easter coming this Sunday, and I don't know how other countries are, but here for Easter, you eat a lot of non vegan stuff like lamb, rack
Yeah,
of lambs, eggs, pies, cakes, and I cannot have
yeah.
none of that good stuff. But I think it's good. I managed to. You have to be healthy for your kids at the end of the day. Like once you get in as a parent and you get older, you don't think, oh, I need to look pretty. You think, oh, I need to be healthy to
hmm
survive, to I guess maintain these kids until they're able to fend for
Yeah.
themselves. So yeah, I feel great. Doug is sending me recipes,
Oh, that's
so
nice.
yeah, I'm good. But
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I feel a bit rusty because I've been working so like nonstop in the last period of time. So this is a good break
So,
from.
why are you working so much? Is there something going on with clients that's keeping you so busy?
You would
Or is it
think.
just clients?
Yeah, I mean, everything is going on right now with Optimize, with GA4, with all the changes. I cannot keep up. I have this slides about GA4 that I have to update every week now.
hmm
So I have a backlog of slides that I need to change. No,
Yeah.
it's just a busy period, I guess. Just a lot of work, but uh, those are happy problems, right? How
Yeah,
about
I
you?
guess so. Well, I mean, I'm keeping busy as well, not for completely different reasons, though. So I think I'm finally going to get the CSS course out. I think it's going to come out next week. I think.
Wow.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I know it blew my mind that I was so fast, but it's just so I've been having the famous last mile problem where I get everything done and then the last 5% takes up just a disproportionate amount of time, just tying all the loose ends together and doing the quality assurance stuff. And I figure I was always wondering why it is. And then I realized that I spend like 28 hours a day in Slack. And if I take, 9 a.m. to noon, if I put do not disturb on my computer, I can get a lot of stuff done. And it took me 10 years to realize this, 10 years of being in Slack to realize this, and so yeah, now I'm doing that. And apparently, like I did that this week for just today and yesterday, and I got most of the course done. Which kind of begs the question: what would have happened if I'd done this, 2 months ago? I'd be working on my third course already. But yeah, we've been traveling a lot. We were just actually in Stockholm
Nice.
with the family, and I have to say, like, we visit Stockholm so much that we should probably get an apartment there because it's a really really nice city for families. It's really great for that. Like they have so much stuff for kids. They have the Unibucken, which is like a fairy tale world because
Okay.
Sweden has this amazing legacy of amazing children's authors. So they've
Yeah.
built this kind of playground full of Astrid Lindgren characters and so it's great. But what we did this time, so my daughter, of course, got sick, as she always does.
Oh
Whenever we go
no.
on vacation, someone gets sick, and so my wife and her flew out. We took the ferry originally, so we were supposed to take the ferry back as well, but they flew out back to Finland. So me and my son, we had the day to ourselves, and we found this museum of technology in Stockholm. We have very same thing and almost the same thing here in Finland, but the difference is that they had an entire floor dedicated to the history of gaming, like video games.
Oh,
So they had everything. Like they had the original Donkey Kong machine from '81. They had like Ataris, they had Commodores, they had Spectrums, they had original Space Invaders there. So all like donations. So you get to play those things. And they had, of course, all the 8-bit Nintendos and Sega Mega Drives and whatever. And the cool thing was that I'm like proud dad moment, but I never thought that much about like Donkey Kong or Bubble when I was like right now I look back at them, I see like they don't look very good anymore.
yeah.
But my son was like ecstatic, like, wow, these are so cool. And okay, he's only 5, so he hasn't played like God of War or anything like that. But it's incredible that games that are like almost 50 years old still stand the test of time against these huge AAA games. So I was just, it was so cool that we found the place. And now I'm really worried that it was a temporary exhibition because we're going to go there every single time we go to Stockholm now. And I just have to
That's
get the
so
rest of our
cool.
family excited.
I think
But
my
yeah,
son would
it's,
lose his shit there because
yeah.
he loves games. Like he's
Yeah, and it was like in general, it was a cool place because they had like all this interactive stuff. They had like an entire floor dedicated to like the future human with AI and VR stuff. They had like the future cityscapes. So it was just a very well done, well made place. But the gaming floor just really blew me away. Like all my history as a gamer, because I've lived with games my entire life. So it was just so cool to find all those little old gems. Like the original Game Boy was there, and I had
oh
that, I had that,
wow.
I had that, I had that, I had that. And
Did you guys had a Terminator in Finland, or was it like a Romanian thing? It was like this old Sega type of, I guess,
it rings a
console.
bell.
It was called the Terminator, and you could play on it. What was that name with the bike? Not double bike. It was that one with the bike. I forgot the name right now. It's an
Okay.
old game. And then you also had Cabal, where you were like shooting things.
Yeah.
It's super old stuff, and now
Yeah.
those are being sold for a lot of money.
They
And I,
are.
yeah, and I remember when I was in my hometown, which is not where I live right now in Bucharest, I found that one in the for 10 euros in like a
Like a
flea
thrift shop.
market. Yeah,
Wow.
I was like, oh shit. And they had tons of them, but they didn't know, what it is. And it
Yeah.
was like obviously made in China, but all of them are made in China. All
Yeah. Yeah.
game consoles would be interesting if it was made somewhere else. I would not
Yeah.
trust it. I was like, I don't know about this. That's
Yeah.
cool. I like Stockholm too. I was there last year for the first time. I like Max a lot. Probably I won't be able to go to Max anymore because
Yeah.
they don't have nothing for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. It's good to know that it's children friendly. I might attempt a vacation this year with the children too. You've inspired me because so
No,
far
it's a really good city for that. And they have like the castle in the old town. It's
I
great. They have
passed
like,
next to it. Yeah, I took a
yeah, they
picture
have
of
like
it.
walking tours, which sound boring, but they're actually really cool because you can see some of the like the jewelry and the crown treasures and everything. And then they have like a little treasure hunt for kids in the castle.
Oh
And
wow.
it's just a and the public transport is great. There's lots of
Yeah.
restaurants. The shopping streets are nice. It's just like it's a really and it's beautiful. Like it's a really really beautiful city. Lots of history here and there. I mean, it has its ugly parts as well. Like 70s came and just did what it did to everywhere. But it's such a nice city, and I kind of hate to say it because I love Finland so much, but I really feel like Stockholm is so much better than anything we have, like city wise. But it is it's a
I
metropolitan
like
city as well.
Helsinki a lot. I had a lot of
Yeah,
fun in Helsinki. I told you I've been. I managed to go to Kitty's public house when we met in
yeah,
Helsinki. I managed to go, and everyone came there, and it's so like tight, and there were so many
yeah,
people inside that I just at some point I got up and I was like, okay, so I
yeah,
just left back to the hotel because it
yeah,
was insane. But I had my chance with the Nap whale. I love Helsinki. It's such a fun city. Everything
yeah,
was fun. I got caught up in rain. And when I left, remember how it started snowing that Sunday?
yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, you're inspiring me to catch courage to fly outside Romania with these kids.
yeah.
I've been afraid.
I know. Yeah, yeah. Flying is always kind of iffy. You on the other hand, you get like a shorter travel time versus the train or car. But on the other hand, you're kind of stuck in a metal cylinder in the sky with potentially hazardous underage kids who have nothing to do. But there are lots of strategies for that. But so the cool thing about Stockholm is that you can actually take the ferry, and it's an overnight ferry, so you get 2 extra travel days. And the ferry has all sorts of stuff to do, like for kids especially. So it's almost like getting 2 extra hotel nights,
That's so
um,
cool.
and you're still stuck in a metal thing in a place where you can't escape except jumping overboard. But I'm pretty sure most parents don't do that.
At
I
least
don't
you have
know.
more stuff to do then.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so today we have a really special topic. I think this is actually from a personal point of view and a selfish point of view. This is the one that I've maybe been looking forward to the most. So the thing is that, well, you and me both, we're content creators. Like we've been creating content for a long time, and we both work in this realm of technical marketing. And I suppose that in a very real way, when we write content for the web or for our clients, what we are doing is we're writing documentation, whether we recognize it outright or not. But what we do is we are explaining how tools work. And so when you look at what product companies like Google or Amplitude or Adobe are doing, and they're actually producing documentation around their products, I've always wondered, like, what is the overlap? Obviously, we're not paid by these companies. We do it because we want to. Well, some of us are paid, but not everybody who writes content for Google is paid by Google. But so exploring this, like, are we actually technical writers? And if we are, or if we even kind of tiptoe into that world, are there things we should be aware of? Like, is it a discipline that we should be aware of? Are there certain things that we've been doing wrong all these years? Did we add all the correct references everywhere? When we write content for the reader, do we address them as you, or do we address us collectively as we, as in we're exploring something together? So what do you think? Like, how do you think about this stuff when you write, or do you just write?
Oh, I think about it a lot. I mean, I think I have two sides of this thing. So like the first thing is when I joined here, where I'm at right now with Media Monks, I came from marketing, as you know, and at CXL I was writing marketing copy, which is different. It has to be persuasive, it has to increase motivation, to increase ability, like it has a purpose. So when I came here and I did my first GA4 audit, when instead of saying upon research or upon analysis, we recommend you to take the following action, I was like, uh, optimize your e-commerce tracking. Like it was so bad.
Oh God.
All of it was
No.
bad. So my like it was correct for
Yeah.
sure, but it wasn't
It
explained
was
in
a
a
very
way.
broad stroke. Yeah.
Very bad. So I showed it to the team lead of that client, because I was like the secondary and he was the primary, and he's Swedish. And he was very nice. He was like, Juliana, this is great. This is great effort. But you know what we can do? And he changed the whole stuff. It was so different.
Oh boy.
But he was nice about it. He was
Yeah.
like, I
That's a good way
understand
to do
where
it.
you're coming from. So
Yeah.
then I thought about it and I was like, oh, I'm thinking this wrong, because an audit is not a sales enablement material. An audit is just an audit. It's a
Yeah.
technical documentation that can help you and your developers fix some stuff or pat yourselves on the back that you did good. And I was thinking when that happened to me about Wikipedia. So Wikipedia for me, and this might be a hot take or not, for me is the de facto of technical documentation, because it has no feelings. It has reference. It's updated. Anyone can read it and understand it, but if the topic asks, it can be very technical. Like if you're looking, for instance, to understand what confounding means, because now I know this word thanks to Matt Gerard. I know that he taught me what it is. But if you search for that and you go on Wikipedia, you will find a very technical explanation of confounding, and you will find references. So, and then it made me think about Google Scholar and so on. So there's like these places that are like showing you how to do it, and then it made me think like I'm not positioning the problems correctly. I'm not positioning recommendations correctly. So it's a whole thing on how you write something. So working this role gave me like this slap on the face, like, yeah, I can write copy, but I'm very more careful now when I write. Like, for instance, I have this dozen of blog articles that I didn't publish, but the copy is not my personality, which is memes and jokes, is very like trying to explain, like, hey, reader, this is how you fix cross domain tracking. So, or like stuff like this. So yeah, it's been a struggle for me as a marketer. So I'm very excited for today's guest because of that. So Simo, before we talk to our guest today, I have something that I want to show you, which also indicates the presence of the banner behind you. So I'm just kind of. Today is mostly my genre, and there we go. This means you have to do the ad.
Yeah, that music is borderline kinky. Like it's sliding into like a softcore movie from the 70s,
It's
but
a funk. No.
it is. Well,
Bad.
funk. Okay. Well, I thought that was super mellow, but it's good. It's good. Um, Yeah. So anyway, yes, Simmer, right? Okay. So I represent a company called Simmer, and we also sponsor this podcast with academic rigor, and we're also always very serious about it. Two things I want to mention about Simmer. First of all, our course Mastering CSS Selectors is almost out. So I have figured out a way to do things and get things done. So this is about to get done. By the time you listen to this podcast, it will for sure be out. If it isn't out by the time you listen to this podcast, please flay me alive and publicly humiliate me because I failed in this very basic task. And the second thing I want to talk about is that we are working on a website redesign, which is 3 years in the making, I think. But what we want to do during that, which is probably close to Juliana's heart as well, is we want to release a kind of free learning resource for technical marketing. So this is again something we've actually been working on for 3 years. And personally myself before that, back in the day when I thought that I would be a published author, I started writing a manual for technical marketing. But we're taking that stuff and turning it into like a learning resource, completely free, no strings attached. We're doing something really cool with it, but just going over all the kind of key concepts and disciplines and terminology around technical marketing and what we think falls under that umbrella. So that's stuff that we're working on right now. And I'm just saying it to give you an excuse why we've been so lazy with the newsletter and everything else. And of course, I have to mention that if you do want to take Simmer courses, you can always use the coupon code DEVIATE, that's DEVIATE, to get 10% off a single course purchase. Thank you. And that was the longest ad I've done thus far.
But wait. So as a co-host of this podcast, do I get to see that before everyone else? Because I'm
Yeah,
very curious.
of course. Yes, we can agree on that. Yes.
We can agree
Yes.
that we'll put a pin on it. I learned that's the corporate way. Like, oh yeah, we'll just put a pin on it and get back to it.
Yeah, we can
No, but that's
synergize our
awesome.
strategies and optimize our performance processes while we're at it.
Oh my god, I'm excited about that. And see, now that you're off Slack, you will probably finish this in a week.
Well, I probably Slack is going to just pull me back in. Like this is just me trying to come up with an excuse that I am actually getting stuff done. But yeah, I have a problem with Slack. I think I'm going to need some professional help with it. But okay, so we have a guest today. It's not just you and me, thankfully for the listeners. But so so the person who's going to come on and hopefully she'll stay on and not leave as soon as she hears this really poor jokes that are it's 10 p.m. almost and it's 9 p.m. in Helsinki, so and in Romania as well. But so Tina Luedtke is a technical writer at Google. I've had the fortune of working with her over a couple of projects, and she's just really, really great at what she does. So I'm really excited to have her here and give some structure to the things that we've been wondering about regarding technical writing and kind of the overlap between marketing and documentation. And hopefully she can kind of give us some tools and ideas on anybody in digital marketing. You're going to end up writing documentation, whether it's a blog, whether it's like an internal Jira ticket, whether it's a Slack post detailing what you just did, you're going to end up writing documentation. And so are there certain things that we should know? Maybe some tools, maybe some tips, maybe some academic rigor, a la Wikipedia or Google Scholar, that we should deploy in our work to make us better marketers and to make us communicate with developers better. So I really want to hear what Tina has to say about this.
So let's get Tina in.
Yes. Yes. Okay. There's some cheering. We have Tina Luedtke in the. Oh wait, not in the house, but in the cabin. Wow.
Yeah.
That is looking amazing. That does not look like a Google office.
Oh, it's not. No, it's a cabin in Arizona. I'm currently on vacation, but I love joining the pod, so I, thought I'm gonna do it anyway.
Such dedication. This is wonderful. We have to, like, Juliana, we have to maybe we can do this. Maybe we could do like a cabin episode where everybody just goes into a shack and starts because I think that would change things up a bit.
I'm happy to come back to Finland.
Yeah, we have lots of cabins
probably
here,
I told you we will need to rename the podcast from next year into Data Lake Podcast.
Oh yes, Data Lake Podcast. Tina, so you're at Google. You're working as a tech writer in which team?
I'm working directly on Google Tag Manager documentation. So yeah,
Respect.
Simo, whenever you post something, I'm really happy. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to improving what we currently have and also pushing out new tutorials. So yeah, that's my job.
So I do want to immediately give like huge props because I've been here since the tag platform documentation began, because when Tag Manager began, and it wasn't always very good. But now with the new tag platform, especially, like it's really, the quality is so good, and it's before the way that Google documentation, and I hope I'm not like Joe Lewis was, who I worked with before you, he was also a very, very good tech writer and a great way to lead the team. But at some point, the process was that Google puts out documentation and then like bloggers filter it into a different format for the public. And I think that right now, the way it works is that for a couple of years now, is that when Google pushes out documentation, especially around the tag platform, it's really, really good out of the gate. And it has the kind of UI and the user experience is so much better. And there's not that much stuff being spread out in different places. It's just such a good job. And it's making our work much easier.
Yeah, I joined recently, so I think much of the credit actually goes to Joe, but also our development team. They are very involved in the documentation, and oftentimes they would also just go ahead and, send me a first draft, and I can basically just do some polishing. So it's been really, really rewarding working in that team, because everyone is regarding documentation as something valuable. And that's not the case everywhere. Sometimes, like in my last company, they let go a lot of folks when they had to cut down on costs, and they basically scrapped the entire documentation.
Of course.
And they said, the product explains itself. And I think that's a common misconception.
They use code comments, right? And that's enough. Yeah. That's depressing.
And it was an open source, product as well. And I feel like documentation is even more important in open source, because you have to be transparent. And if you want to engage with other people contributing to your project, you need to be as transparent as you can get, because otherwise, how should they understand your code base?
That's actually a really good point. I'm embarrassed. So I put up like a lot of stuff in GitHub over the years, and I never write any READMEs. And I always wonder, why aren't people contributing to this stuff? And then I look at what people like, a good friend of mine, Mark Edmondson, who manages the Google Analytics R project. And like that documentation is amazing. Like it's a combination of JS doc and annotations, and then like and it almost feels like he takes documentation really seriously, and it shows in the popularity of the product and the project as well. So it's so
I think that's a great point to set the stage here. Like, I want to know, what is technical writing for anyone that's listening right now and is not familiar. What is technical writing? Like, what's the definition of technical writing, or what does it mean for you also?
So the very basic definition of technical writing is creating aids for users of any sorts of products. That can be software, but also machinery, to safely use that product. And to me personally, it also means transforming knowledge that you get from the people that work on a product, that create it, and transforming it into words that the actual user understands. That's what I love about my job. I'm kind of a translator between the worlds. Between like high context, very detailed view of the world, view of the things, versus what does the user actually need to know to reach their goals. Because I think one difference between tech writing and all other sorts of text is when it's consumed. Oftentimes people skip reading the documentation and they play around, and then something goes wrong, and then they're like in panic mode, and they're like, oh no, I need to fix it. And that's when they sometimes check the documentation. That is not true for all use cases, but we've all been there, right?
I like to do that, especially when I buy something like drawers or a table, and I don't need to check on how it's done. And then I realize I put the legs on top. It's like, oh, let me go back to it. So that's funny. I love that.
So do you build like IKEA without the manual? Like, is that possible?
That's hardcore.
I am known for doing that before and failing miserably.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Also, like life-threatening if it's like your son's their bed or something, and it just crashes. Well, anyway, we don't have to go into that. So, so Tina, when you say that you write for users, so you're taking the technical stuff and you're turning it into something that the end user can understand. And I think so. You're talking about users of like customers and clients who use Google's or Google Tag Manager or the tag platform. But do you have documentation or tech writing also for Googlers, like for developers and engineers who might need to know how Tag Manager works, for example?
That is an interesting question, because we do have dedicated tech writers who document internal processes or internal tools, because at Google you probably know that, but maybe not the audience. We have a lot of tools that don't exist outside of Google. So we basically need to be careful about, making sure that everyone is on track and knows how to use that. But oftentimes we hire tech writers to write documentation for external consumers, because it's kind of the culture that the developers should also document, especially for internal tools, document it themselves. So you have varying quality. Some do, some don't. Depends on the team, how well it's kept in shape. But yeah, we try to be at a really good level for external consumers, because they don't have all the context that we at Google have, and even that is pretty overwhelming.
Yeah.
So we try to, I know that cloud, and we have like a lot of products that are really difficult to use, but at least we try to make it a little easier with documentation.
Yeah, and the cloud is a good example. Like their developer documentation is great, but it's like a technical reference manual, and you need to kind of understand that environment and that world. But there's fairly little in how to take that and apply it into solution guides. I mean, they have solution guides, obviously, and there's a robust blogging community around it. But it is very, very reference documentation oriented. Whereas what GA documentation used to be was more about like support and help center articles, like this is engaged, this is a bounce rate, these are metrics, these are dimensions.
Right.
And what we lacked was a robust reference documentation. And I think we're kind of approaching a point where we have both in nice quantities, but it's still very, very different worlds, the kind of marketing tools and then the hardcore cloud platforms.
Oh, yeah. But I think of the cloud platform also as more of a piece of clay. So everyone wants to do something different with it. And it's much harder to write stuff that is focused towards one use case. So I think that might be why there is a lot more reference documentation.
Yeah.
And also in terms of the audience, I think with cloud, we are expecting that people have a certain level of tech background, and they already kind of know what they want to build. They just need a place to host it on or run things with. Whereas with GA, we also have a community of marketers who, for example, might have some technical understanding, but they necessarily don't code. And it's a much more narrow scope of the product. So I guess that's why we focused a lot on help documentation.
Yeah, but there is some more and more overlap these days, I think, with like GA4 pushing people to using BigQuery, and then you have server-side GTM, which introduces, I think is doing an amazing job at introducing the world of cloud to people who were like regular GTM users before, and now they have to understand what a virtual machine is. So it's pretty cool to have that.
True.
That transition as well.
As a technical writing challenge, I actually like writing for developers a little bit more, because I feel like you have to do less translation between the developer that worked on the feature and what you have to use in the end. Whereas I find it much more challenging to write for someone who's just getting started, for example, who might know some marketing lingo, but they may be like a single marketer in a small firm and they only have limited time. So you have to be really transparent and precise, and you have to do much more, let's say, translation between those two worlds. So that is actually really challenging at times. And when you then check the comments, sometimes it's really helpful to see where people trip and they don't find the documentation helpful. Other times you sometimes also encounter users who are just, beyond helping sometimes. And that is sad to see. I know.
Yeah.
Like
It's
someone
okay. You
leaves.
can say it out loud. It's okay. It's a bit brutal. It's a bit harsh, but you can say it.
It is a little harsh, I know, but someone asked, for example, how they can install Google Analytics 4 onto their machine. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Okay, understood.
that's what I
Yeah,
mean. That's what I mean beyond help. So that's
yeah.
why, it's sometimes really cool to watch what people do on YouTube. I found that really helpful in preparing
Yeah.
for the job interview, to see where people go and what they click on. And it's, video content is so great because it shows you frame to frame, basically, where you go, where you start, where you go. And I feel like with text documentation, you sometimes lose that. Yes, you lose a visual element, but also the transitions. So sometimes when a screen does something, like for example with GTM, we have like tons of like those overlays, and whether we like them or not, they're there. And I can't. It's just cumbersome to always say, oh, then this new screen pops up, right? But in the video you would see. So especially for new people and this who might wonder, do I install this on my machine? Do I use this online? They really profit off of like the work you do, for example, with actual screencasts or blogs. So I feel like the documentation blogger community, they form some sort of like synthesis, because you cover also the things that we don't necessarily have time for at Google, because we're just such a constrained resource. So we focus on the big 80%. And I feel like the bloggers are doing a wonderful job to actually go into detail or explain something from a different point of view also. So yeah, that's why I actually appreciate this community so much.
Yeah, great.
What I find truly sorry, Simo, I'm fascinated. So what I don't remember if I smiled this much in a podcast before, maybe when Tan was here. So what I find truly fascinating from everything that you said is that you said in the beginning that you're right because you want to help people make progress, which is a huge thing that most I come from digital marketing, and in order to write copy for digital marketing copy for landing pages and so on, you also need to know how your users make progress. So you need to do research, you need to do interviews, you need to watch recordings. So it's so amazing for me to hear a technical writer speaking exactly about the same values. And honestly, I can count on my fingers the marketers that do jobs to be done research, because that's the one that's used to know the jobs that people want to do and you want to find out what's the progress. And to hear it from you right now, like, you just blew my mind. Like, everything after, I'm now here looking at you and see where I'm like, oh my God. So she's a technical writer and she knows about this stuff. Like, what excuses other people have when they write very shitty website copy. So
and she's vacationing in a cabin in Arizona. Like, how much better does life get?
Yeah. Tell me about your research process. Like, okay, you have to write an article about something in Google Tag Manager. What type of research do you do before? How do you prepare yourself to help that user make progress? I'm fascinated right now. I'm sorry.
So I think the research process differs a little between what I did before and what I'm doing at Google. So before, when I was working in open source companies, I basically had a direct line to people. Or for example, I don't know, our COO was talking to someone who was like, hey, get in the room, listen to us, check out what types of problems people are solving or want to solve for. And at Google, I feel like I'm not entirely in touch. I can directly get to people as I would within open source community. So it looks a little different. My top resources here are research that is done by UX. And if your company has a UX, like UX department, and you are writing either like landing pages or help content, make sure you get in touch with them, because oftentimes when they run a user test, they only focus on the product and what the PMs want them to test. But maybe you can get them to sneak some questions into like documentation as well. And I actually did that when I did an internship at Bosch. I basically recruited people to actually just test the documentation. Maybe we want to chat about that in later. But so UX research is a great resource. Then we have customer support. That is also a really important feedback loop, especially with this, if it's stuff that also like already exists, because they already know what people run into, kind of the issues they run into. RPMs also do a lot of research in regards to like product market fit, and they like you can't publish anything at Google without writing a document in, like we have something called a design document where you lay out what type of problem you're trying to solve and how it will look like. So that is also a really great resource. And sometimes I'm also attending a thing that we have called empathy hours, where people do basically UX research, but they give you an outline of questions that you can ask people directly, and that is super helpful as well. So that is like the only way I can actually interact with people. Or I can always ask Simo. That's always great.
I give terribly biased answers, so it's not worth it.
Oh,
So
but,
yeah, move on the other side of the scale. So you do research and you source things from within the company and maybe look at some YouTube stuff and what people are talking about. What about the other side of the scale? Like, how do you know if your work is good? Like, how do you measure success when you write technical documentation? Do you have like a OKRs around it? Do you have like a 1 to 5 stars from your team lead? Like, what is your?
That is a big question, and one that is actively debated within the tech writing community as well, because with text you can measure different things, right? You can try to measure the quality of the text, and you have some scientific parameters, for example, a reading ease scale. So that is like a formula you can apply to your text, and it tells you this text is readable for people in grade 10 or so. But then you also have quality indicators that, as you say, come from users. So we do have those thumbs up, thumbs down buttons. And we actually look at the ratio of how happy people are, and we aim for a 70% satisfaction rate, because there's always people that, that find something not helpful. But then there's always the case that if people were able to achieve their goal, they might not be on the page by the time they actually see the buttons and they don't vote. So you don't know how much signal you actually get from the ratio of votes versus the page views you have. So you kind of have to do some interpretation when you look at satisfaction scores. Like, if only 5 people voted and you have a satisfaction vote of, 0%, but their overall page views are 20,000, then probably the page isn't too bad, but the rating shows, people aren't happy.
So what kind of analytics do you do? Like, do you look at like scroll depth, dwell time, what people click on, how typical behavioral web analytics stuff? Do you do that?
Yes, we do that, and it is interesting. So you probably noticed we have 2 documentation platforms. We have a Tag platform, which covers more of the technical stuff, and then we have support.google.com. And support.google.com is powered by a CMS, and we have a custom built analytics platform for that as well. So it is really easy to see on a quick scale what people like, how many impressions you have, how much time they spend on a page. And sometimes even like if people spend too much time on a page, it's also an indicator for bad quality, because it's like, oh, they didn't understand what you're writing. Then what else? Sometimes I look at bounce rate, especially when I want to know if people, make use of a page, or if they find it not helpful, but they didn't vote, for example. Then I also like to look at page refers to map out where people came from. And sometimes that helps me find paths. Like I'm currently trying to overhaul the documentation a little more, that it's like more clear-cut paths that you can follow, because I feel it's still a mix and match type of thing we got going on in some places. So especially if you look at user journeys, like your UX department might have a user journey for the setup, and where people start, what kind of processes they follow. The documentation, in my point of view, this is like opinionated, should follow that user journey as much as possible.
Yeah.
And we still have pages that haven't been touched in 2 or 3 years, and they're more like functionality centric. And that is like that is like the two paradigms that you can follow. Like you can follow the logic of the product, or you can follow the logic of the user.
Yeah.
Both are valid approaches, but for different things. So we have, in some products like Google Ads, you can open the help within the product, right? And if you don't have like a feature-centric page, then it's much harder to actually use the product, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, it makes sense to document certain options, buttons. And when people come to the documentation because they Googled something, how do I set up Tag Manager, and they don't see it within the product, then it makes more sense to follow the journey, so people can actually click through the pages and they feel accomplished.
Yeah. One of the really cool things that I learned from you when we last talked over a one specific project was that you talked about like documentation debt. And like I've always known about technical debt because it's a thing that we suffer with, especially in open source projects that don't have documentation, and with lots of collaborators. But you raised that point just now. So you have actually support pages for features of the product that might not even exist anymore. So how do you, like, what are your tips? How do you handle that? Like, as content creators, we constantly have the problem where, okay, so GA4 just did a UI overhaul. Okay, well, let's start going over our 72 hours of videos and redo everything. So what are your kind of tips and strategies for that?
So one of my most favorite tools when it comes to keeping your content up to date is actually a content audit. And it's always kind of painful to do it because it is a lot of work, but I regard it as like spring cleaning. So in essence, the content audit is basically mapping out what content you have and how fresh it is. Freshness is a concept that we have at Google that refers to when was it basically last edited or last touched. And you can often find content that is sitting there for a year or 2 years, and sometimes we have features that actually don't get any attention anymore because they're fine as they are. And sometimes features do evolve and we're like, oh god. So that content audits are great if you're like, actually if your management backs you to spend time on cleaning up documentation, but you don't always have that time.
Yeah.
So what I like doing for new content, especially for example with UI changes, and we have a huge launch coming up, and I had to overhaul like 30 pages or more. It was like huge. I like to basically collect, before I start anything, I like to collect a list of affected pages. So sometimes when I collect that list, in that process, I spot documentation debt because I see pages that have like duplicative content. And on that note, I think I want to go a little deeper into that because that correlates with it. So docs debt for me means two things. Like, is the doc fresh and useful? Is it still up to date? And then also, how well do you describe it, and is it duplicated somewhere else, and how is it duplicated? Like, if you copy and paste things, that's not always the best option. But if your, for example, tool doesn't allow for anything else, okay, maybe it makes sense in some use cases. But what I often find, and that is the hardest doc step, is when people explain the same thing, but then use different words, because you can't even like Control F and search for something and then just update it. So sometimes in the list of affected pages, I spot the same sections. I'm like, okay, we can standardize this. So many tools have the ability for you to create like text snippets, and you can just, like building blocks, use them somewhere else. And I really like doing that for example, conceptual pieces, like what is a tag, right? Sometimes you need that in multiple places, and instead of writing it 5 times, you can just define it once and then reuse it everywhere. So that is like a really good strategy to get away from doc step by just, reusing when it's possible and when it makes sense.
Like a macro, basically. You just that's really cool.
So I have to ask this, because have you, in the tech writing community or in Google, because this sounds like a prime use case for a LLM. You put all the documentation in it, and then you just kind of ask it, show me all the places where I talk about some UI feature which might have 15 different ways of talking about it, and the LLM kind of makes sense of it. So do you think AI has something to offer into this process? Because the reason I'm asking is, what I'm thinking is, I have videos and I haven't classified those videos, so I haven't tagged them, but I would like to do like maybe some tool that can go through the videos and classify, like in this video, I am using the GTM UI and showing the navigation. So now it's tagged like that. So then I can just search through all the videos where I might have mentioned the navigation, which has now changed. So I have to read all those bits, maybe with timestamps. So it kind of feels like AI could be a really big help here in going through that mass of documentation.
It might. So of course we kind of, especially within Google, we kind of debate this topic a lot. And I have used, like, of course we were able to test some of our AI products before everyone else. And I've tried to use it, and I found in content creation, the results were mixed. So content creation, I think, will still be one of the areas, at least for the foreseeable future, where we are needed, because it is about a new thing and the machine didn't see it before, right? So for example, when I'm trying to write release notes, which I find a little dry sometimes, I just kind of tell the AI agent about the feature in rough scraps, basically, and it comes up with a sometimes actually somewhat good representation. But I just regard it more as a writing aid to get the juices flowing, and then basically just amend it. And for analyzing existing content, it is interesting that you ask that, because what we're currently seeing with many models is that it kind of gives you a smoothie version of the content. It kind of blends it all together, but doesn't necessarily list its resources. Some do, some don't. And to do some sort of content audit, it kind of would go into the vein of a content audit to kind of, classify your videos. You might be able to leverage it, but I think you will still need to do some manual aspects, because it might just try to condense it too much and you don't get the signal that you need.
That's a good point.
So maybe using AI as an assistant to what you're trying to do probably gets your results faster. But just kind of giving it your playlist or so, and then asking it to, check every video for something, I don't know if it will actually do that. But, these things get better all the time, and I'm looking forward to see what will come around. I'm not feared for my job. I think it will just change, because many content people are like, oh no, I will be replaced by a machine. I don't know. Oftentimes when we've seen developments like this, it often gets easier to automate away tedious tasks and
precisely
spend more time creating value. And I mean, that's what every company wants, right? So I'm really positive about this.
This segues very nicely to something that I've been thinking about. You were, I mean, I guess when you were saying that you need the human to know exactly like the product and the feature to be able to write about it. So I'm wondering, when a technical writer starts to write documentation for a product, how well does that person need to know the product, the features, in your case, JavaScript and so on? Like, even if you write content, like I have a blog, which is very unkept, but that's another story. I spend time, I mean, I have to know what I'm talking about, but I also spend a lot of time making sure that I don't say some stupid stuff. So when I wrote the technical marketing guide, I went through all of Simo's articles. Okay, this is good. Cross-reference. Okay, I'm not saying something bad. So like, when you're writing for a product, which is such a huge product that's been helping us for so many years, what type of, how much is enough to know as a content writer?
Right. I feel like it helps if you know it a lot, and especially with products that are so intertwined, you really you run into barriers all the time if you don't know the product really in a deep level. And I noticed that when I was coming out of my onboarding and I was asked to write about consent mode, and I still have that draft lying around and really have to, publish this thing once. But I noticed, okay, well, this consent mode thing, it's really hard. So I actually watched other people doing it on YouTube. I'm like, okay, how do other people make sense of it? And in that process, I followed them and learned myself how do I implement it with Tag Manager. And I went actually like in my browser settings and checked which cookies were set. And I actually went in deep, because I think the assignment was to write something about how to implement consent mode with server-side tagging. So, little spoiler, I'm working on it. It will come at some point. And you kind of, especially if you have to write for the developer audience, you do have to meet them where they are. I think that is true for every kind of documentation. You have to know where your users are at, and you have to meet them there.
Yeah, you're doing such a good job at kind of planting those segues for us that we don't actually have to do any awkward stuff for ourselves.
Nice.
So this actually, we're going to have to start wrapping up soon, but this leads to a large part of our audience is obviously digital marketers. And we're like number 5 podcast in Finland for,
Ooh.
over 40-year-old ice hockey fans, or what's the demographic. So, much of the work that anybody working in digital marketing, whether it's consulting or in-house or blogging, it is writing documentation, and it's talking to developers and getting stuff done and writing Jira tickets and everything that's involved in trying to get another party to work on things that you know intimately about, but they might not. So how do we help our audience are there certain things they have to keep in mind? You mentioned meeting the developers where they are, and maybe even inviting them to come halfway and meet us where we are. But are there other things we need to, like, how do we become better at writing that documentation? How do we make it more understandable? What are the kind of things that go through your mind when you think about the different audiences we need to communicate with? Is it just about communication, or is there something else as well?
Okay, let's see. So I can give you some tips about how to write better documentation, of course.
Yes, please.
I feel like I feel like a lot of people that necessarily do other things in their day job and then they're being tasked to also document things, they often run into this trap where they have all of the context and then they write something, and when they read it, it makes complete sense for them because their brain is in auto-completion mode, right? We just fill in the gaps. And I mean, to conquer that, obviously, ask someone who's not familiar with this and give it a read, and they will basically probably mark the whole page, and they're like, hey, can you please rewrite this? Because I didn't understand it. So in order to address this, what I really love doing, especially when I'm creating a new page, is I'm trying to get a skeleton on the page first, because blank page is scary. So I often try to break down the content into questions, because it then feels like like a dialogue basically that you have on the page. Like, what is this feature? Why should you use it? How do you use it? And then I'm also, when people get started with tech documentation and they kind of do the same things over and over, and we often do code reviews, I'm kind of trying to explain things as I make better suggestions. So for example, if someone writes a long paragraph about how to do things, I'm like, hey, you can actually like transform this into a list, and then people have some steps, and it's also much better for SEO, so there's a few pros to that. And there's like tons of good resources for people to write documentation that are not tech writers. Big shout out here to one of my favorite open source communities. It's called the Good Docs Project, and they actually they publish templates that you can freely use, and you can just basically, if you have to write release notes, you can just go there, grab a template, and just have to fill in the blanks. So it's basically a really great writing aid. But if those templates aren't what you need, go with the backup strategy of basically just creating your own outline first before you write, using the questions technique. There's also a few free courses. I know that Google open sourced their Tech Writing 101 and 102 courses. 101 focuses a lot on language. So if you're, for example, not a native English speaker and you have to write in English, that is a really, really great refresher on grammar as well. Then I think Tech Writing 102 by Google focuses more on the ins and outs of tech writing. It's really lightweight. You can probably do it in half a day or something. So if you really want to take documentation more serious, there's like really a wide array of resources available that are free. There's also a few books I could recommend, but they're like more tailored towards people who actually want to get into the field. So,
What's the season of docs? Can you tell us a little about it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that is great. And I think the application deadline for that is already like passed. But Season of Docs is a program that Google hosts to connect tech writers with open source projects. And it works that way that open source projects reach out to the maintainers at Google, and they basically have to scope out some requirements or work that they need to be done on their documentation. So for example, I participated in Season of Docs, and they asked me to write a guide because they had a CLI tool and they faced that people had trouble with onboarding and getting started. And basically they wanted to have a complete walkthrough, and that's what they kind of scoped out. And what they did was they reached out to Google and told them about the project. Hey, can you please, include us in the list? And after the project submit, then the tech writers have a chance to reach out, and they're like, hey, this sounds interesting. Can I work on your project? And the best thing is it's paid. So you do get some compensation for your work. And I think that is sponsored by Google. In my case, they had already settled on a tech writer, and then they saw my application. They're like, well, I mean, we can probably also afford to have a second one, and they paid it out of their own pocket, which was really generous.
That's so cool.
That was like, that made my day. So that is basically what's happening. Google is paying tech writers to work on open source documentation. And in terms of scope, it should be work that's doable within a reasonable time frame, maybe 6 months, with someone who's working on this maybe 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, because many people do have day jobs or they're in uni. And so the audience that writes are mostly tech writers or DevRel people, but it's also maybe a great segue if you want to explore this, kind of writing a little more. So it's a really great project, and I hope they will continue it in the future as well.
Sounds like a really, really awesome idea.
I never heard about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
maybe you
definitely
should.
gonna take those courses about technical writing because before you came in here, I was telling Simo how I did my first GA4 audit with my very marketing language. You are about to embark in a very interesting e-commerce tracking right now. Optimize data layer. That is what I said, and I'm okay to admit I said they need to optimize. And then my lead
Yeah.
came and he deleted it. It says correct data layer, not optimize.
Yeah.
It cannot be optimized. Thank you.
Potato.
Yeah, for me it
Yeah.
was the same. That was so
Yeah.
embarrassing. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I really enjoyed this episode. I usually say before each episode, I'm so excited about today's guest, but today was the first time when I heard Simo say, "I'm very excited about today's
Oh, I've
guest."
always been excited, but I've been
Yeah, but you
double
said
excited.
it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just such a
Great topic.
Yeah, and I think that like secretly, like if they don't admit it, and maybe it's not like explicitly in their rhetoric, but I think everybody wants to do better at documentation, and everybody
yeah.
wants to find the communication channel. And like I said, like us working in digital marketing, we all have examples of how things implode when you don't get that right, and then it becomes like finger pointing and who messed up where.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that everybody needs to become suddenly like academic writing professionals and have their references in order or use the best tools or anything. But just the very first quote that Juliana took out of your mouth was help the users make progress. And I think that's so difficult to keep in mind, because for some people blogging is just about brain dump. I have something on my mind, I have to get it out. For some people, writing documentation is just about, I have to do this. I have these things that need to be said. And they don't consider how do we actually help the reader become better at this thing so that they can do their work.
Oh, I have the perfect closing remarks.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I teed that up for you.
I definitely know this whenever I have done something myself and then I have to document it. Oh my God, I don't want to do it. But the reason why I love being a tech writer is someone else already did the work and I get to explain it. So if you, for example, have worked on a big thing and, you feel like, oh God, now I have to document this, maybe set up a one-on-one with your favorite person and ask them, hey, can I try to explain this to you? Just between us, and maybe can you take some notes about the highest level things that you took away from this? And that way, you kind of have already a draft of what is about to be documented, and you only have to kind of refine it. So it takes takes that anxiety or that anxiousness away, because you already have something to work on, and maybe that other person liked documenting so much that they're gonna do it for you. So
this is Tina's spice up your marriage. Start your discussions by going over your documentation and see how the other one reacts. That's really good. I'm gonna try that on my wife.
Oh yeah.
So I'm really, really happy that you joined us. I was looking forward to this, and this did not disappoint. I've learned so much here, and I'm sure that our audience has as well. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your vacation. I know that Google doesn't exactly let you do unlimited time off, so it's great that you could join us as well here. And Juliana, what do you think?
Sure.
Are you ready to start?
I'm gonna go take those free. I'm gonna take those free courses that she mentioned. I'm excited about those, and I'm gonna look them up.
We're gonna add all of those to the show notes for sure.
For sure, yeah. I need to write better audits and write better documentation for developers. Thank you so much. And also, like, where can people find you, follow you, connect with you?
I tried to tone it down on social media. It just sucked away a lot of my time. But if people like this, they can follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm gonna send you the link for the show notes. I think that's where I often post stuff or kind of bigger wins. For example, I did a blog post for Season of Docs, so you can find it on my profile.
Okay. And we'll link that back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Should probably take your advice and try to get off social media because I posted like 4 weeks. I posted
Yeah, but
40 memes.
you're incorrigible. You put so many memes up in a day. It's becoming very exhausting to follow all that comedy.
Oh, it's so much. Yeah, today I exaggerated, but you should probably not check my last meme, Tina. Only you won't like it.
Oh, now I will.
Oh, you won't like it. Thank you so much for
Thank you as sorry is how we usually end these interviews.
Sorry, yeah.
Apologies.
Oh, yeah.
Enjoy your
Thank
vacation.
you too. Thanks. Bye.